Hey, how are you, man?
Hello. Good. How you
It's been a
been?
while.
Yeah, I know, right? It's been a minute. You been okay?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. Just like halfway through pharmacy school now, so I'm seeing the light at the end of the
Oh, that's
tunnel.
cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's honestly like a great job to get. I feel like you make a lot of money doing that.
It'll be all right, yeah. This past week's been crazy though, because like everybody's sick. So
Yeah, yeah, me too. I have the vid currently, or at least like did, and now I'm like in quarantine. So
how are you feeling?
I feel fine. I had like 102 fever the other day, but I got like my shots and my booster and stuff. So it's just like, it was just kind of like a bad cold for a couple days. But yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be like most people's stories. At least they have had the vaccine, so hopefully that'll stay true if I get it. Which probably is
Yeah.
coming at some
Yeah.
point.
I was kind of dumb and I did a lot of stuff for New Year's. So I put myself in a bad situation. This new variant, man, it's just like spreading like crazy.
Yeah. So you live in New Orleans now, right?
Yep. Yep. I live in New Orleans. I moved here back in June 2020. You still in Tallahassee?
Well, I'm back in South Georgia now, so I'm like an hour north of Tallahassee.
Okay, cool, cool. Like
Yeah,
Thomasville?
I'm like
That's cool.
an extra like 20, 30 minutes on 19 north of Thomasville. So yeah, pretty close. I'm on little holes in the dirt, so that's the best city to probably to say I'm close to. Um, yeah, the pharmacy program is weird. It's like the first 2 years, everybody's in Athens at UGA, but then the second 2 years, everybody goes to different parts of the state. So I'm like the Southwest Georgia region because it's supposed to like encourage us to practice in different areas of the state.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess like to jump into it, I guess. I guess
Okay.
this is probably where I'll like, edit it to start. I like to have the guests I'll have on introduce themselves. So like, what's your name, your pronouns, what's the elevator speech of what you do, that sort of thing.
Okay, yeah, sure. So my name's Dalton Spangler. I use he, him pronouns. I am a music journalist. I am doing it like kind of sort of part-time right now, just freelance. I write for a few different local publications in New Orleans, and I've written for a couple like different people in the like national scene, but I've only been doing it really as like a freelance job, I suppose, since June of last year, 2021.
So how's it work being a freelance journalist?
So freelance, it's just basically I'm like on my own. It's sort of like you're almost like your own business, but my clients are actual music publications. So I pitch to them saying like, hey, this sounds like a cool story. Do you want me to write about it? And I try to tell them like why I'm the good guy to do it or whatever. And hopefully they say yes. And if they do, I do it. And then hopefully I get paid is sort of the way it works. But, you know, I'm kind of just starting out. So it's like, I don't make a ton of money a month doing it right now. I'm just getting like a little bit more. So I do something else part-time to like make ends meet. I work at a record store. So at least it gets to be like music adjacent. So that's cool.
I mean, I'm sure you run into all the local people just trying to get their records in the store.
Yeah, sometimes. And it's cool because like we sell local records and stuff. And you know, I've definitely learned more about the scene by working at that job for sure.
So how well do like local records tend to sell?
Uh Not like, I mean, obviously the most popular records are usually going to be the more popular artists. Like we sell a lot of Kanye, Weekend, Taylor Swift, like people like that. But you know, you get a few people, especially tourists, like in New Orleans in particular, they'll just come in and they really want New Orleans stuff. So usually they're looking for things more like, you know, Dr. John and Fats Domino and stuff like that. But sometimes people want more like indie stuff. Like there's community records here in New Orleans and a few other spots. So we sell some of their stuff.
don't you mostly cover like the New Orleans scene at this point? Or
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm doing. I'm trying to I feel like I've pigeonholed myself a little bit into that. I feel like geography matters a lot less than I suppose it did like decades ago. So I'm trying to like get myself a little bit out of that geography like limitation. But there's a lot of really great stuff in New Orleans, and I love that stuff. It's also just, you know, my music interests lean more towards like indie alternative punk stuff. And there's a lot of cool stuff that's happening in other parts of the world that I want to talk about too. So, and like cover and report. So trying to break into that some more. But yeah, mostly just for Offbeat, which is the music magazine I write for here mostly. It's all like New Orleans stuff. But they did just give me Big D and the Kids Table to review their album. So like that's cool. And they're like, you know, a California band, I think.
so what goes into like Offbeat deciding when to cover people that aren't from New Orleans?
They're kind of random about it. It's not really a good system. So like Offbeat is a very independent magazine that's been around since like the 90s. It's just like 4 people. Like it's just this dude and this lady basically that run it. They're husband and wife. Jan is the publisher. She runs it basically. And then Joseph does the other side of it, which is like more the album reviews and like little stories. And then he also, I think, helps with like payroll and stuff. So I talk to both of them a lot. But yeah, it's like them and then a couple other people. And so the rest of it's pretty much just contributors like me. And so they'll just basically call you and say like, hey, you want to write this? Or usually it's me pitching to them saying like, can I do this? Can I do that? Because it's like just these random people, like I shouldn't call them random people. I've obviously been in the business and stuff, but like, you know, they're just doing their own thing, you know? So like sometimes they'll see something and they'll just throw it out. I'm like, oh, that would have been a cool record. I could have reviewed that. I would have wanted that. And I'll say that, and they're like, okay, sure, go ahead. It's like they're just very, you know, laissez-faire about it.
So I was writing for them compared to like the like you said you've done some like national stuff.
I did one story last year for this hardcore magazine in LA called No Echo. I did a story about a guy here in New Orleans. His name's Hollis Murphy. Basically, Hollis, he passed away last year, died of COVID, I believe. And he was just a big member of the metal and punk scene here in New Orleans. They've done a bunch of tributes for him. There was a huge second line parade for him. And they were even talking about renaming one of the local memorials here after him instead of a Confederate general. So like he was a big dude and there was a lot of people. They raised $50,000 for his funeral fund and for the family. So just like, you know, he was just a good guy and the community really cared about him. So I tried to write a story about, you know, his life and his legacy and that kind of thing. And No Echo was interested in that and let me publish for them. So I've tried to pitch to some other places. That's sort of my goal with 2021 is to try to maybe write for some places like Bandcamp, you know, try to expand my bylines to some bigger, more national folks. But
So I imagine like with a local magazine is, you know, it's a lot easier to kind of get your foot in the door. So how do you, I know you said you kind of just pitch it. So how do you get into that like realm of the more national stuff?
yeah, I like the local stuff and the regional stuff a lot because it's more what I'm used to and it's a little bit more collaborative. And so that's sort of why I've gone that way. And also because like they give me more gigs. So I make more money with them. But as far as getting into the national thing, that's sort of what I'm trying to figure out. I'm actually I've gotten a lot of good resources just talking to other music journalists. There's this newsletter called Music Journalism Insider. That's pretty cool. If you don't know that, I would check it out. The guy who runs it, his name's Todd Burns. He's given me some advice and he's also sent some people my way to like sort of help me figure it out and that sort of thing. And he's got all these like different like databases to help people get started and pitch and that sort of thing. Like here are the different emails and contacts and things you need to know to like send off to people in Bandcamp or people at Pitchfork, Stereo Gum, like all these different things. So like that's really helpful, just sort of compiling all that, making it simple for people to get into it. But really, from everything I've heard from other people, because I'm kind of new to this, I think, is that it's really just a matter of like sticking with it and just continually pitching. One thing I learned from, I'm forgetting his name, but it was a good piece of advice that's always stuck with me is, you can't control how many pitches you get like accepted, but you can control how many pitches you send out. So his goal one year was to send out, 12 pitches a month for whatever that is, with 12 times 12, I'm bad at math.
144.
Yeah, 144, right. Pitches a year. So that's like, what's his goal? Like, I'm going to do 150 pitches this year, and I'm going to make sure I send 12 pitches a month at least. And they don't all have to be accepted, but as long as I'm sending those pitches and defining my own success, then I'm succeeding, And so I sent off probably maybe like 25 pitches last year to like larger publications, and I got one. So, it's like, I'm just trying to like stick with it and see what happens. And I was sending to a bunch of different people. One thing I think I want to try this year is try to stick with like just one publication and see if I can get that one, but.
Do you have a particular one in mind?
I always thought it would be cool to get into Bandcamp because they do like good stories about entire scenes, not just like single artists and stuff like that. And so there's a story I've been wanting to try and pitch to them that I'm working on. Besides that, I mean, like obviously any of the other big ones, but I feel like Stereo Gum would be cool. My dream would be to write for somebody like Pitchfork or Brooklyn Vegan, but Brooklyn Vegan's hard to get into. They don't do a lot of contributors. I'm kind of focusing on local stuff, or at least I was last year. I just went on a hard like pitching binge for a little while. I was like, this isn't really going anywhere right now. So I'm going to focus more on making some money here and then, see where that goes. But I feel like I'm rambling.
That's the point. I want to hear you just talk about everything. You're okay. Good. So since you cover a lot of like the New Orleans scene, I guess just like, I know this is obviously you can't really be a simple answer or anything. So just like, tell us about the local scene as you see it from a journalist perspective.
So I think that there's a lot going on in New Orleans. This is sort of, New Orleans is a cultural heritage site of the place. There's a lot that goes on here. There's a lot of music history here. And when people think about it, they usually think about jazz or maybe like some newer stuff, like maybe like bounce music. But there's more to it than just all that. Like they think Mardi Gras and stuff, which Mardi Gras started a couple days ago. Mardi Gras season started the 6th. But like all that stuff's cool and I think it's important. But from a journalistic perspective, I think it's interesting to look at the stuff that's going on beyond that. Like there's a pretty big hardcore and like punk scene in New Orleans that I feel like is generally unknown of, or like, that's not the right way to say that, but it's generally unknown. It's like, there's so many, like, I guess the biggest band is probably like I Hate God and stuff like that. But like grindcore is really big here for whatever reason. There's a lot of like gutter and crust punks in the quarter and stuff. And things like that. There's also a couple of like cool ska bands and like indie labels and stuff. So there's just, there's things happening here. I think you wouldn't expect, because New Orleans, although it's a big city, it kind of feels like a small town in a lot of ways. Like it's not a huge place. Like you could drive from one side of it to the other in like 30 minutes. Whereas there's places like LA or New York that is just like massive. I think I've never been to really those places in a journalistic capacity. So I don't know what it would even be like to start there, but covering something here, it just feels very, you know, small towny in a way. It's like everybody knows everybody.
So how's New Orleans compared to being in Valdosta, where you used to be like really small?
Yeah, right. So like where I used to be a page designer at a newspaper in Valdosta, and like that there I did some stuff on the side, like a podcast interviewing musicians that would come through and stuff like that. I would interview local musicians. I did stories on that. And that's sort of similar though. Valdosta was a town of like maybe 50,000 people. It wasn't big, but it has a similar small town vibe here where everybody knows everybody. And so it's just like, once you meet like one or two players in the scene, you just kind of meet a lot of people because of that. So getting into it's really easy. I think the big difference in New Orleans is such a well-guarded place. Like they are so wary about outsiders here, rightfully so, that they just don't want like gentrifiers moving in. So you have to be really respectful and you have to kind of put in your time here. Like I feel like in a place like Valdosta, you can just move in whenever you want, basically just parachute in. But in a place like Valdosta or in New Orleans, it's like you really have to put in your time here. Like I was talking to a friend of mine who's a local musician, and you know he's been having a hard time. You know, he still gets like really good paying gigs and he can make a living off being a musician in New Orleans, but it's such an insular scene. And so he said, I feel like I have to put in 10 years to even like be respected here. And that can be really discouraging for people, especially young people who don't really want to spend their whole life in New Orleans. After Katrina, there was a lot of people that moved into like the Ninth Ward and the Bywater and like, you know, general hipster people. I don't like that term, but like that's sort of the kind of people that came. And, you know, it's just gentrification happens, families have to leave, and it's not great. You know, so like I get why people are wary of outsiders, but it's also a bit frustrating for someone like me who is an implant to always have to break down these stereotypes that are assigned to me.
Yeah, it's
as
really
they are for
interesting
every.
The whole 10-year commitment, because like most of my experiences were like the Athens, Georgia scene, which the
Yeah.
average lifespan of a band there is maybe 4 years, because it's mostly just college kids coming in, starting a band and leaving when they graduate. So like of course you have the people that have been there for 20 years, but like a lot of the people there, bands are really short lived. So it's interesting to say, like, go to New Orleans, you have to put in that long before you really get anywhere.
Yeah. Well, it's because a lot of people, they are born here and they die here. This is their home and they love it. And, you know, if you're a musician from New Orleans, you are like king usually. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a lot of really great heritage here that you can really only fully experience if you're from here, but it's definitely different. It's definitely different. And that's sort of that's why I think that geography not being our masters anymore is so like, it's such a big deal, because like for young people, like I'm only 24, it can be hard to break into a scene. Like even like the zine communities here, like just like little like independent publications and stuff, they've been around for like 20 years. You know, these people, these big players that dominate the scene. So it's like, it's intimidating. And so it's like, I think that with online, you can find communities that, you know, support each other. Like you can find people that like your stuff, and you can find people whose stuff you like. And I think trying to find a community online is sort of the way to do things nowadays. And geography doesn't really matter as much, but it is cool to be able to live in a place like New Orleans. I love living in New Orleans. I don't know. I don't know how long I'm going to stay, but I don't know if I really want to leave yet either. So it's hard.
What brought you to New Orleans originally?
Well, actually, so what brought me to New Orleans was my girlfriend, partly. She got a job as a teacher here in New Orleans, and also partly the pandemic just was happening in the newspaper I was working at. A lot of changes were happening, and I wasn't really happy there. And so I thought that coming to New Orleans would be a nice change. I have family in Louisiana and like in Baton Rouge and stuff. And so I came here. I was actually a teacher for a year between the fall of 2020 and the spring of 2021. I didn't really like it so much. I gave it a shot. I tried to go in with an open mind. It was a hard year, but I think I did a good job. And I went through the whole year, but I decided not to come back. And that's when I started doing this like part-time freelance, part-time, record stores after I stopped being a teacher. So I've really been at it for about, I guess, like 7 or 8 months now.
What did you teach?
I taught English.
What grade
English
level?
to 8th grade. Yeah, 8th grade, middle school. Yeah, that's a tough age.
Yeah, middle school, I've always heard is like the worst. But that may just be because my parents are middle school teachers, so they want to say they have it the worst.
I think, no, there's a good argument to it. I think 8th grade is probably the best because they're at least somewhat motivated to get into high school. I would hate to teach 7th grade because they are just in it. They're like, I don't care. I don't have to make it to 8th grade, man. But at least in a lot of kids don't want to be in middle school still. They want to move on. So they're a little bit pushed to get semi-decent grades.
Yeah. It's interesting you brought up zines. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, they're still middle schoolers. I mean, they're going to act their age.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting you brought up zines because one thing I was thinking about asking you is like, as a music journalist, if you thought zines were still relevant today in the age of the internet.
Oh yeah, no, I think zines are in fact probably more relevant. I don't know. It's like zines are different. Because I'm not like an expert in this because I don't make zines. I have always thought about it. I think zines are really cool. But like I know I follow a bunch of different people online who make zines. There's Dan Ozzie, Miranda Reinhardt. Those are some cool people that make zines. And they're like new. Miranda's kind of new. Dan's been around for forever, but it's like an artsy medium now for the most part. Like there's less of the like old school 90s like punk music publication type zines where they interview bands and stuff. It's more like you have some of that, but it's usually more like like pictures and like poetry and and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that it's becoming really popular the same way sort of like vinyl records have become popular. It's like there's so much digital crap out there that it's nice to have something tangible like a book that's been crafted for you. So I think there's a solid dedicated community of people who love to make zines and love to buy zines. Like if you get into zine making, you can find people who want your stuff. And I don't know fully why that is. I've heard that like back when Tumblr was a thing, zines had a big online resurgence because of that. But I don't really know. It seems like there's a really strong online community for it. And yeah, it's just like also a local thing in a lot of cities. Just people build that stuff up.
So have you ever made a zine?
I've never made one. I've always thought about it. Like I have like a tab of my Google like favorites or whatever. It's like how to make a zine because it's always just like something I go back to. But no, never made one. I think it would be cool. It could be like a sort of like pay what you want kind of thing, I guess. But it's definitely like a labor of love kind of thing.
And I think it kind of prompts the question. Do you do the newsletter thing, like stuff that you write just DIY, like in a way that is like an online zine, just not necessarily having, this is just more stripped down version.
In a way, like zines definitely have like more artistic like opening because like, have like a physical thing or whatever, or even when you're designing it digitally, it's usually, whatever. But like with the newsletter that I have, I use Substack. And so they have a pretty strict, like how you can lay things out, which is fine. Like I can still make it look the way I want it to. And today, actually, I'm going to be I'm kind of updating my newsletter to be something a little bit different. I'm calling it Orbiting Punk, and basically I'm trying to make my newsletter align a little bit more to my musical interests and sort of get myself out of this corner that I've sort of backed myself into. I feel like with New Orleans, it's like I love New Orleans. I still want to cover New Orleans, but I kind of want to branch out and do things that I'm more interested in. Like I want to try to see if I can interview bands that aren't from New Orleans that I like, you know, and write about people like that. So I've always liked the newsletter though, because it's just a place where I can always have space to write. And Dan Ozzie is one of my favorite writers. He said something in an interview not too long ago about his recent book that stuck with me. He talked about why he moved to start a newsletter. And basically he just talked about how there's this HTML graveyard of old publications that have kind of come and gone from like the 2000s to now, where all of his work was lost. And having your own platform allows you to kind of have that like paper trail that you can protect and you can build up yourself and not have to rely on these publications that seem to just come and go with the internet. Just so much changes so fast. So it's nice to be able to have your own little protected like platform, I guess.
Yeah, it's something I've thought about a lot over the past probably year or so. Just how like people think with the internet, like everything's archived, but like really it's not, because either stuff will eventually get lost, like you're saying with dead HTMLs, or like it may be there, but it's buried in upon mountains and mountains of like, how do you get there? It's almost like the stuff that is there is buried. It's similar as it's like something exists in the ground, but nobody knows it's there. It's how it's going to be to try to find anything from like today on the internet almost. I think like 100 years from now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's hard to find new things on the internet today. Like, I mean, how are people going to find my newsletter? Like, in what way would a random stranger like stumble into my stuff? Like, right? Exactly. It's going to be like probably word of mouth. Maybe like I share it on like a Reddit page or something. You know, you have to go to like the places where people are. And if you're a dead publication that's buried, you have to have someone come and find you, basically. And so why would they do that? So it's sort of, you know, you have to create the space for it, and you also have to kind of work in the spaces that already exist. I wish I had an answer for like how to do it all. But
I think it'd be interesting if like somehow a culture developed like throughout that would be like, I guess like, you know, groups of people from whatever local scene just tries to like find have a place that compiles all the like stuff about that, you know, areas, artists or whatever have you, or any other part of the local culture, because otherwise it's going to be lost eventually. I'm biased and like really want everything archived, which I know is like a fool's errand, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I definitely sympathize with that. I'm sort of like that too, and I think that's why I love journalism. That's part of the reason maybe is it does that. You know, it creates, it's like the whole first page of history thing. You know, it like creates this record that exists and can sort of stay. Hopefully, is the goal anyway. But with any kind of online publication, you run the risk of losing it. You know, it's like even like being on Substack is a risk for me. If I just made my own website, which is hard as hell, I could maybe have a little bit better control over that. But it's just like, you know, I always think about like, I wonder how many like cool music writers there are on MySpace that have just like, you know, been completely swept away.
Yeah, because your computer's just going to crash if you try to go on MySpace at this point. It's like, what is happening? So you've done both like written stuff a lot, as we talked about a lot. We also, you know, like you mentioned earlier, you did the podcast back when you were at Valdosta Daily Times. So how does doing the audio format of an interview compare to just doing like a written article?
I think sometimes you got to think about, I guess, who your audience is. It's like, for most people, I want to say that an audio format is more accessible because people already are listening to podcasts and want stuff to listen to for their commutes or whatever. And so I think that it also kind of depends on what you're doing. So like if you're doing interviews like I was doing, I think interviews in an audio format are better than like transcripts. I kind of hate reading transcript interviews. Like it's not my favorite. Like I'll still do it. The only times I ever really do is when I'm researching something, or if I'm like really into this artist and want to actually, or like whoever it is, and want to know what they have to say. So like that is sort of, I guess, a big difference between written and audio with interviews anyway. It's like reading a transcript is just not the same. Whereas when you're listening to an interview, it's like, it can be conversational. And even if there's like weird side stuff that isn't completely relevant to the, topic or whatever, it can still be interesting because you're just killing time usually when you're listening to a podcast or something, or you're doing something else like washing your dishes or something. So I don't know. I think I kind of miss doing podcasts and I want to get back into it. I kind of want to get back into like everything because I miss doing video and stuff too. I used to do video when I was in college. So I thought about maybe doing that this year.
I need a whole documentary about the New Orleans hardcore scene. I give you 2 years.
Yeah, I mean that would be cool. That would be cool. Yeah. I think that my goal right now is to sort of focus on getting my newsletter kind of back up and running regularly with this new deal. And then hopefully by like the middle of the year, I want to be doing like podcasting and video. And I don't know how consistent it's going to be, but like I want to start doing more stuff. And that's my own stuff, like that's not even like the freelance stuff. That's why I sometimes think I have 3 jobs. I have like the freelance work job. I have the, actual day job at the record store. And then I have like my newsletter and whatever side stuff that I want to do just for myself. And so it can be a lot to juggle sometimes. So that's definitely been something I've had to adjust to.
So do you ever like write an article and then pitch it and then it doesn't get picked up and so you just publish it like your newsletter?
I probably have. Yeah, actually, no, I definitely did. I did that one time. Yeah. Offbeat asked me to write a tier list, basically, ranking all the record stores in New Orleans because they wanted to do this like thing that would basically just be like a ranking every month. They wanted to start with that, and they asked me if I'd do it. And I was like, hell yeah, that basically is a column. I want to do that. And I sent it in. It was like 1,000 words. It was long too, because there's a lot of record stores in New Orleans. And I only had 10 on the list, but yeah, that didn't get published for whatever reason.
The question is, was the one you work at number 1?
No, it wasn't. I honestly, I want to redo the list because one of the people I ranked pretty high, I don't really like anymore. So I think I would actually probably bump us up a little bit. But I would say we're probably like middle of the pack, like 5, I think there's definitely better record stores. My favorite is this place called Euclid Records in the Bywater. So if you're ever in New Orleans, they're big. They have like 2 floors. They're also just like this neighborhood record store. And so they're really friendly. And it's just kind of, just like this little record shack with all these old cool records. And they're also always getting in new stuff. Like they get stuff that I don't even know how they really even get, because it's like, I think it's because they're part of technically Euclid Records. There's another one in like, I think St. Louis or something. So I think they get stuff that way. It's like stuff that will be on back order for us. They'll have in store like 2 months in advance. And I'm just like, how'd you do that? It's like, I didn't even know those were printed.
Maybe they get them from like overseas and there's like a stockpile like in Europe or something and shipped in.
It could totally happen that way. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that comes from like the Czech Republic for whatever reason. And yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I've learned a lot working at a record. I'm working on a story now about the vinyl shortage, actually. So I've been learning a little bit that way.
Yeah, nobody
So,
can get anything printed. Was it like 6+
yeah,
months wait time?
yeah. No, that's the industry standard now. Like everybody has to wait 6 months for the record, and indies are kind of being pushed back a little bit further, which is sort of a tragedy because indies have been like the main people responsible for bringing back vinyl, really. But you know, that's how it goes. People with money.
Yeah, because the big people pay the premium or whatever to get it expedited, from what I've heard.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just like, I mean, majors have money, and record presses need money to stay record presses, and they're always a reliable customer. They are going to take all of your capacity, 100% your factory, if you let them. Because they always have more, like, Adele or whatever to print.
Fair enough.
Adele is the talking point, I guess, but it's not just her, I guess. 500,000 records is a lot. Not trying to undermine them.
So what other like insider secrets have you learned working at a record store?
I don't know if I'd call them insider secrets, but like, it's just fun. Like, honestly, I've just discovered more music that way. Just, I have a lot of cool coworkers and stuff who I can talk about music with, and even just like going into I've kind of adopted our used CD section a little bit. It's just something I do when I'm bored. I'll go back there and like fix it up, make it look nice. And so but yeah, I've just like seen names of artists, like, like I've found like a bunch of Sean Kingston records and like old stuff because it's used CDs, and I'm like, I wonder what this sounds like. So I'll go home and like bring it up on Spotify or whatever. So names that I recognize from like the pop world, but didn't really think about the rest of their music. Like I got into Kate Bush last year.
Pop music's probably better than all the alt people want to give it credit for.
Yeah. And like, like Sean Kingston, he's like hip hop and stuff, but like, he was also big in the pop charts and whatever. It's like, whatever was printed the most in the 2000s is what we have mostly, because that's where most of the CDs come from. And so it's like, it's helped me, I think, be a more well-rounded person and like music enthusiast. So sometimes I feel like I don't know anything when I talk to people. I'm like, oh God, you know everything about music. I don't have that encyclopedic knowledge. I don't know if I ever will, because my brain just doesn't work like that.
I don't think you need to be like one of the guys from High Fidelity. It'll be okay. I don't know if you've watched that movie.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. I've never seen it, but yeah, it's like even scrolling through TikTok or whatever, you'll see like people whose whole channel is just talking about like, industry secrets, like, oh, who wrote this big Katy Perry song or whatever. It's like this random dude who also wrote this Rihanna song. Like, it's like, oh, I've never heard of this man, but maybe I should. Like, just stuff like that makes me feel like a fraud. I'm being
everybody counts, Dalton. Don't let them put you down.
That's right. Yeah. I haven't been reading liner notes since I was born.
Why do you think the cassettes have had a resurgence as well? Like, why the cassettes and not CDs?
Cassettes are, I think, okay, so from talking to other people, what I've heard a lot is that people think cassettes are popular because they're old, basically. They're just vintage, like, Gen Z, younger people. They weren't around when cassettes were around. I wasn't around when cassettes were around. They're weird to me. I don't listen to them. I have a cassette player now that I bought for $20 somewhere. It's like this old vintage one, and it's pretty jank. I can only hear through one speaker with the plug-in for whatever reason. So I don't ever use it. But I think, so there's a couple factors at play. There's like that vintage thing. So like people who are older and have lived through it, they don't really care. But new people, they're like younger people, they think it's cool because it's old. And then the other thing is the whole vinyl shortage has made it harder to get vinyl, which is like the premium physical format. So people are more willing to get cassettes. And the funniest thing I heard was somebody called cassettes stickers that play music. And I just think that's very accurate because they're just so little, and you know, they're not really like, you can't like, cassettes have a very short lifetime in comparison to other formats. So it's like, if you use it too much, you will just basically break it and it will eventually just be that little sticker in the piece of plastic. So yeah, I think it's cool, like good for musicians for having more things to sell, but like, and I think the other thing too is like CDs. The reason why people aren't gravitating towards CDs is CD players aren't widely available as much, and like people aren't actively going out to buy CD players. And also I think there's like this perception that CDs are digital, like they're still kind of like digital music. You might as well just listen to Spotify. So it's like, unless you have an old car or like a CD player, and you're still see CDs as like a physical format, then you probably don't really want a CD either. You know, you still want vinyl if you're a music enthusiast, you know?
Yeah, I guess it's just weird because like to me, like the draw of physical media is that I have to like get up and put it in the player. Because I have to put in any amount of effort, is all of a sudden I feel like I'm going to enjoy it more. Because I'm like, oh, I'm actually going to do this thing instead of just being something random I do on my phone like I do everything else. So to me, like a CD is just as good as any other because I still have to get up or take it out of its case or whatever. I guess I have like this strange negative association with cassettes because like, so I was in high school and like trying to make music. The only thing I had was my dad's old 4-track like thing that you could burn onto cassettes. And being like, I wasn't very good at it. I didn't really know what I was doing. So like to me, a cassette is just this thing I could never figure out how to record music on very well with a 4-track. I mean, I could do it, but I don't know how like old stuff was like from the 60s sounded amazing recorded on a 4-track. Like I don't know how that happened because it's not going to sound good when I use this 4-track.
Yeah, I think 4-track's a horrible media. I like, we'll get people that bring them in sometimes to the record store like, hey, do you want to buy my 4-tracks or 8-tracks or whatever? And we're like, no one wants this. But you know, I mean, it was like what they had at the time. But yeah, I don't blame you. Don't blame you for not understanding. But yeah, I think CDs, I like CDs. I have CDs. Like I'll buy CDs at shows sometimes. They're just generally cheaper too than records. So if I don't have a lot of money at the time, but I usually prefer.
I like that they're bigger. The artwork looks cooler. I feel like it's not like me zooming in on it with a magnifying glass.
Yeah, it's like you could do this, I guess, but you're not going to put a CD in a frame and put it on your wall. Usually. You know?
I don't know. A lot of times they would fold out. Like you take the booklet and they have like a poster in a way. Sometimes.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, it's like collectible Pokemon cards or whatever. You can have like a little book.
So
I still have my Pokemon cards.
Yeah, it's on top of my closet. That's the thing that's going to be the. So you're Pokemon, not Yu-Gi-Oh! I see how it is.
Oh, I was both. Yeah, no, I think I actually like learned how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! I never learned how to play Pokemon.
Same.
But like playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I still didn't really play by the rules, but you know, it's like
house rules are all that matters.
Yeah, right? It's like ritual summoning. What? I don't want to sacrifice my creatures. I just want to slap down 3 blue-eyed white dragons.
Let me do it by the original show's rules where like you didn't have to do any sacrifices to play the big cards. You just like slap them down.
Yeah. Pot of greed.
That's like half my deck. So I feel like I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can. I don't know very much about music journalism, so I have a limited capacity of knowing what to ask.
No, that's okay.
uh,
I mean, I'm cool with just hanging out and talking.
oh yeah.
Yeah, I think music journalism's in an interesting place because it's like a lot of people don't have staff jobs in the music journalism industry. A lot of people are freelance. And so I kind of think I want to make freelancing like that. That's sort of just like my goal. I don't really want a staff job. Like it'd be cool if like I got a staff job at an awesome publication somewhere, like whatever, but then usually you have to move to a new city and there's a lot of extra stuff that goes on with that. So it's a lot to consider. And with freelancing, you can kind of do it wherever, whenever, you know?
And I guess like you were saying with like geography not being as big of a deal anymore, like being freelance, you can cover stuff from anywhere really.
Yeah, I mean, it's like obviously if it's happening in your town, that's a good reason for you to be the right person to cover it. But it's like if you're the one who found the story, or if you feel like this is like an undercover topic that you can give some insight to, it's like why not cover, you know, something that's happening in Anchorage, Alaska, or whatever, you know.
How do you do you think the way people write like music articles today varies considerably from how people wrote a couple decades ago?
I don't know, because like I've read some stuff from like a couple decades ago, but like I don't know if I have like the best comprehensive knowledge of what it was like. But I think that there is definitely more of this. Maybe this has been going on for a while, but I guess like this sort of blogger style of writing where it's just like very conversational. You know, it's like you talk about music like you're talking to a friend about music. And like obviously everybody has different styles and different voices. But like in music journalism, I think it depends on the subject matter, I guess. It's like if you're a person on TikTok who does recommendations for music, which is a totally legitimate thing, that's cool. Like you can have a conversational tone with that and that work. But if you're writing about like, you know, whatever garbage happened with turnover this year, I don't know, you probably want to take a more fact-based journalistic approach that's, you know, just stating, you know, what happened and who said what and who did
No,
what.
gonzo journalism only, Dalton.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, and that stuff's cool too. Like, I think what I admire so much with like the people I follow, like different peers and things, is that in our age, there's so many different types of journalism and like people in the world that we can like look to for inspiration. Like, you know, Joanne Didion just died, and it's like everybody I knew on like music journalism Twitter was like tweeting about how she died and how big of an influence she was on their writing and stuff like that. And it's just like it's so interesting because, you know, she was, you know, obviously a huge deal, but like that was that new journalism of the 60s, and that influencing people who write punk scenes. You know, it's just like weird to think about all these different like levels of influence. And I it's similar to like music, I guess, in that way. But yeah, I don't know.
Is there anybody that's particularly influenced your writing?
So for sure, like I've already talked about Dan Ozzie. He's definitely one who I look up to a lot. Chuck Klosterman was somebody I emulated for a while in college. I tried to sound like Chuck Klosterman. I kind of don't like his stuff that much anymore. It just seems very like pretentious sometimes. But I like his style of writing because it's punchy and it's academic and it's clever and funny, while also like being insightful. And so Chuck Klosterman's a cool guy. There's Chris DeVille from Stereo Gum. I read like a lot of his stuff. I think he's cool. And also like honestly, I've just started listening to more podcasts, like podcasters influence, not really my writing, but just like my music journalism, because I listen to podcasts for like to sharpen my interviewing skills. You know, it's like, how do they sound? What's their like style? What do they open up with? What do they, you know, just different things like that. I like to listen to podcasts when I'm just like waking up in the morning, or you know, doing chores or driving somewhere.
What podcast have you been listening to lately?
So a few different ones. I'm trying not to say all the same names because, like, funny enough, Dan Ozzie has one that I've listened to a little bit. But there's this one called Washed Up Emo.
Yeah, I listened to that one too.
Yeah, that guy's cool. Behind the Vinyl was the one I was listening to last night. The guy, I just found him on Instagram, and he's interviewed so many different people, and I'm just fascinated how he did it. I'm sure he just asked. That's really all you have to do. You just have to ask. But like his third episode is with Mannequin Pussy, which I just think is huge.
I'm so excited they're about to play Tallahassee in a month or two.
Yeah. So my friend's band Guilt is playing that show. You should check them out. It's GILT.
Will do.
Pretty big deal for them. They get to do that little Florida stint with Mannequin Pussy. That's pretty cool. But yeah, I've never seen them live. I had the opportunity in 2019, but I didn't get to go. I wish I did, but they were playing in Gainesville, which is, you know, just down the road.
I think they played Tallahassee that same year, either 2018 or 2019. And like, I was like, I should go to this, and just never made it down to it. So now I have the chance. Anybody else you've been listening to in terms of podcasts?
Like, hold on. I'm just gonna go look real fast. My friend told me to listen to Stand By Your Band, so I've been listening to them a lot. I think they're pretty cool, if you know them. It's just like this comedy podcast, basically, but they talk about different bands and why they don't suck, or why they do suck.
It sounds like they're just the opposite of there's a podcast called Your Favorite Band Sucks, and the entire time it's just them shitting on bands.
Yeah, I know that one too. Yeah, it's basically that. Yeah. There's also In Defense of Ska, that's pretty cool. If you're into ska music, they're like the primo one. Yeah, there's a lot of great.
I do think ska is an underrated genre.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that for me personally, I didn't really learn what ska was. Like, I obviously had heard ska, but just didn't know what it was. Like, I didn't really learn what ska was until college. And that's kind of just because, like, when I was in middle school and high school, it wasn't a thing. Like, people didn't really at my school talk about it or like shit on it. And so I never even knew that ska was a hated genre until like shortly after I learned about it. I guess I figured that out. But
I'm not sure I knew it was a hated genre until like relatively recently, because to me it was just like you're saying, just people just don't talk about it. But then, like, have you ever seen that YouTube channel, the Punk Rock MBA?
Yeah. That guy's cool too.
And the way he talks, I learned via that ska is one of those genres that just gets a lot of hate.
Yeah, I was so surprised that he hates ska. I think it's just because, like, I remember hearing like him talk about it, and he said something about how he made a video shitting on it or something, or shitting on something or someone. I don't think he was shitting on ska in general, but there's like some ska people that reacted poorly in the comment section, which doesn't surprise me. But like, there is a pretty cool community of ska folks that aren't totally like annoying. It's just they care about it. And I think it's a very sore subject because of how ska has been treated in the past and totally canned by critics and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of people on the defense with it, hence In Defense of Ska. But generally speaking, ska fans are like so lax, like they don't the whole point of the genre is to not take things seriously. So it's like I sometimes I think there's a little bit of post irony to the whole like ska's the best thing ever. If you say anything, bad about my ska, I'll hurt you. I don't know. I hope there's nobody threatening anyone with violence. That's not cool. But
I've admittedly never been to a ska show, but like as an old band kid, I always just seemed like a really fun genre to play.
yeah, I mean that's how all the old ska bands came about, right? It was just like band kids are like, oh, this is a music genre. Let's start a band.
I get to play trombone in a rock band. Let's do it.
Yeah. But I've definitely gone to way more ska shows in 2021, I mean, than ever in my life. And they're always a lot of fun. Like they're just some of the most fun shows because they're just it's such danceable music. It's usually like a very like cool crowd. There's no crowd killing or anything like that. Everybody's a dork and a goofball and they're just having fun. It's like, yeah, you could really come out of your shell,
Well, tell them all to come to Tallahassee so I can see them.
Yeah.
or to the Valdosta DIY house.
Yeah, no, DIY House does ska sometimes. I think they had a ska band not too long ago, actually. I saw a ska. I have their CD. They just gave out their CDs, like mixtapes, basically. But they were really good, and I don't even know their name. I'm gonna go figure that out, actually. Yeah, they do stuff.
Just talking about DIY houses. Is that like an active house scene in New Orleans?
No, and I was disappointed to discover that. So in New Orleans, it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. It's like in New Orleans, there's such a strong music community that they don't really need one, partly. There's not a good all ages venue currently in New Orleans, which is sort of a problem. But they don't exist because the housing like laws here are just so strict. It's like people are cool with music and stuff, but because it's a bunch of old buildings, fire hazards and like safety codes are pretty strict here. So generally things pop up all the time, but they get shut down really quick. But I shouldn't say that also. There's not like a bunch of DIY punk house stuff, but there's like this weird upper crust of like music industry people, like kind of snobby stuff that goes on at music house stuff that I've seen. It's like, oh, I'm gonna have an exclusive music thing in my backyard, and it always has like this excellent sound crew and like the music's cool or whatever, but it's just sort of it's a different house culture than what I've experienced in other places. It's like usually if you're doing a DIY house, it's like some like grungy, rundown house somewhere. But here it's like somebody's really fancy shotgun with a back garden and a pool, and they're just playing on their pool deck, and like that's cool. That's awesome. It's different here, and it's not like advertised. Again, it goes back to the whole like you have to really put in your time here because it's very much like insular, but it's a small town, so once you know people, you usually find your way into those things. It's weird.
So what's New Orleans been like since COVID in terms of the music scene?
So man, it's gone through a lot. There's obviously a huge population of musicians in New Orleans, a lot of gigging musicians that make a lot of money doing things like weddings and stuff like that, but also musicians that do performances. I can go see George Porter on any Monday at like Maple Leaf. And so like because of the shutdown and when venues weren't around, that like hurt a lot of musicians, but the community really came together and helped like give people money and like help them stay afloat and that sort of thing. A lot of venues closed down, but some of them came back. And now that things are back open and vaccines are required, people can go to shows and they can have shows. And so musicians aren't so like desperate for cash, but it's still really tough. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same story as I think a lot of places, but the cool thing about New Orleans is that there's a lot of this like collaborative effort within the community to take care of each other, sort of mutual aid type stuff.
Yeah, I know one of the,
And
I think it was a local record, or not record, but I don't know who it was, but who had that Mutual Grit album for like, it was a hurricane relief this past year. I think I found out that from your newsletter.
yeah, I wrote about that on my newsletter. Yeah. So Mutual Grit, they put out a sort of like a compilation. They're like this electronic music group. They do DJ nights at this local bar where they teach people how to like be DJs and stuff. They're really cool people. But yeah, almost immediately, like that's what took me back about their release. Like it was like the Friday after Hurricane Ida hit. They had this mutual aid record put out, and it was just happened to be Bandcamp Friday, and so they were able to put all their proceeds towards mutual aid efforts, basically. Yeah, I mean, it's like I think they had some songs already kind of cooked up for this, and they were going to release it anyway. But then they just sort of like, in the matter of like 3 days, were able to sort of put out some more stuff and like focus it on Hurricane Ida. And yeah, there's even like this one release where a guy literally made a record. It's like an ambient electronic experimental record of just like hurricane sirens and like sounds from Ida. Like there's like police vehicles going by and like people yelling, and it's just like a 2-hour like mix mash of music and like recordings from the hurricane. It's really weird stuff. Bandcamp's a wild place.
Yeah, I love it. It's just great. Yeah.
Basically, if you didn't do a fundraiser for Hurricane Ida, like that's just so, a lot of people didn't do it, or I mean a lot of people did it, and so if you didn't do it, it's just weird and kind of looks bad. I think it's like, are you really a New Orleans band? Did you put out did you donate?
What did you do?
Yeah, right, like.
So I guess,
Cool.
Is there anything going on in like the music industry right now that excites you, like as a journalist? I don't know if I already asked that or not.
No, you haven't. That's a good question. I guess if there was something, I would be able to say it right away, wouldn't I? But I think, let me think about this, because there should be something. I mean, there's always something that excites me about it. I mean, that's part of the reason why I want to do it. It's like there's always new music coming out. There's like 20 releases that I can think of right now that I'm excited for this year. It's just like there's always something more to talk about. And I'm excited for like a new crop of people to show up. Like I feel like I'm getting older every day. I feel like a fucking dinosaur at 25. You know what I mean? It's like, it's weird, but it's also like, so it's exciting. I'm ready to see like what, young people, what new bands fresh out of high school are going to be doing this year or next year or whatever. And the DIY alt scene has just been like really exciting too. Like DIY indie alternative music. I felt like in 2019, things were really heating up, and like we're about to really like boil over, and there'd be an explosion of new waves of bands that were breaking into like moderate success through TikTok. And we've seen a little bit of that, and like other places obviously too. I don't think there's going to be any like pop radio. I don't think we're going to see like what happened in the 90s or anything like that with alternative music. But
I think there has to be, like, you can make such a like decent living just with like, was like if you get 100,000 views a month on Spotify, or is it 1 million views, like, or listens, then you're pretty much like,
yeah.
You can have a decent income.
And there's definitely bands breaking out and like being able to make it their full-time gig and stuff, but they're not like, topping Billboard charts or anything like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But in 2019, it felt like there was going to be this kind of like big explosion. But then in 2020, the pandemic happened and everything. And now it seems like we're finally picking that up. And like in 2021, there was so much new music that came out, and like people are back out touring. People have new lineups now. Like it just seems like a lot of bands are really meeting their potential, and we're able to use that like break they had in 2020 to like recoup and keep the momentum going. So as much as it killed some people's like momentum then, it seems like people are really picking it back up. So I'm excited to see like, when is it going to explode? Is it going to happen this year? Is it going to happen next year? I don't know.
I guess part of
But
what
I
could
feel
go
like
into that is as I've interviewed people over the past like 6 months or so, shows started really happening again. A lot of like artists were saying that they seem to have a better response from audiences since COVID happened. Because I guess like a lot of them were saying, I guess after people were away for so long, they realized how much they missed it or how much they wanted it. And also they said just audiences seem to be responding better in the sense that like people aren't on their phones as much at a show, and people are interacting with each other and with the band just at a heightened way compared to before it. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not.
Yeah, no, I definitely think you're right. I think that people being locked up all year made them excited to come back and see shows, and like maybe made people realize how much they miss it. And it's also like tours are still getting canceled all the time. And like with the Omicron variant, there's a lot of stuff that's canceled for January. And it's like people are still very, I think there's this less taking for granted for live music. And I think people are just more online and digital than they used to be with the pandemic and stuff too. So I think there's more music discovery going on. And yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's hard to say, but that's what it feels like anyway. I think it's a really exciting time to be in a band or to be covering bands. And I think that's what I also love about music journalism, is that it seems like it'll always be that way in some way. Like there's always going to be something new and exciting. And that's sort of the nature of art, is it's always evolving and growing.
Yeah, please don't ever become that old person who says, "Oh, things just aren't good anymore."
Oh God, I hate people like that. Yeah, I really hope I don't end up that way either, because I have a person I work with who's like that. It's just like, there's no new good artists. Like there's one good person. Blah 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 blah. Like, bro, you're just not listening to music, or you're not opening up your mind. You're just not listening to enough new artists. But
yeah, it's like my cousin who's like our age, and he says that stuff. I'm like, you're 25. Why are you saying this bullshit? Like, stop. Yeah, you're too young for this. You shouldn't do this ever, but definitely not at this point in your life.
That's all it is. Yeah, I think it's also like, it's so weird. There was this whole like, I should have been born in a different generation thing that happened with people our age. And I don't fully know why. I guess, I don't know.
Like all that music's available now. I mean, I guess you couldn't see them in their heyday, but like, I don't know. I'm someone who just thinks that like every moment is potentially the best. Like just look for the good stuff and you'll find it. Like, no, I'm sorry. What were you gonna say? I just don't think any like era is inherently better than another, I guess. Except for maybe like everything's better than the 50s, just because the 50s were so limited because they were censored in what they could release.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, obviously like every decade's going to be different, but it's like, how do you even go about starting? Like, how do you judge what is the best decade of music? Like, that's just such an impossible thing to do. But yeah, I just think like, I don't remember where I heard this, but like, I remember somebody saying like, the reason why they love listening to new music is because they're always looking for their next favorite band. Like, what if I haven't actually even found my favorite band yet? Like that idea is something I think about a lot when I'm trying to find new music. Is like, what if there's somebody out there who I really would love, but just haven't looked in the right places yet, So yeah, I think people just have to be open-minded to it.
Yeah, I tried to go into music with like the mindset I had when I was in like middle school, of just like where everything was new and seemed amazing because I hadn't necessarily thought of something before, heard something before like it. And the thing about it is like, it seems like a lot of people become cynical as they get older because they'll be like, oh, this sounds like X, Y, and Z. But it's like, you can do that with anything. Yeah, but basically, you can do that with anything. And so, and the thing I guess that really goes to me, I try to think like, at the end of the day, somebody like put a lot of time and effort and to make whatever you're listening to. Like, it mattered enough for them to put in the time and effort to make it. So like, don't shove it off as being completely worthless. I guess I try to think about like what, this obviously means something to this person. So like, let me try to have meaning for myself with it.
I feel that way a lot with when I'm working on album reviews. It's like, if I'm gonna sit here and try to critique somebody's work, I better put in as much energy as I can, because obviously these people like put a lot of time and energy into creating this album. It's like, I definitely think there's something to be said about at least like respecting the effort that people put into things.
Yeah, I was reading a couple of your articles from Offbeat, and you seemed to, I was only able to read a couple because then I got hit a paywall. So, and admittedly, I didn't pay for them to get past it. But
that's totally fine. That's totally fine. I don't like paywalls. I think they're dumb. But yeah, Offbeat, they don't do paywalls on reviews. So that's nice.
I don't know. I was in some type of, I thought it was reviews, but it's like, I got like, maybe it was only one paragraph then, but it was like, subscribe now or something. Anyways, the point I was trying to say is that like, you seem to have, based on the few I read, you seem to have a more positive outlook on reviewing albums. Like, yeah, you'll have criticisms and you'll say them, but you seem to not be like I guess this isn't the best word, but you don't do like in a belittling way where you're just like kind of like crapping on the band. Like, you seem to like, let's try to see what value there is here.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that.
It can be fun to shit talk albums. That's fun to do, but there's real people on the other side of that. And like, who's gonna honestly read my review every time? Probably the artists I'm writing it about. So maybe I'm just a chicken, but like, I just don't want to, like, if I wouldn't say it to them in their face, like, why would I put it in writing? It's like, I actually accidentally ran into a guy I reviewed the other day, and it's just awkward. It's like, if you wrote something like that's not all praise, it's always just a little awkward, because it's like, oh yeah, I'm the guy who shit talked your album in Offbeat. So yeah, when I'm dealing with like Offbeat stuff, generally it's local artists that are like small time, don't have a ton of listeners, and it's like, they're usually just genuine people who want to make music. Why would I like just straight up bash them for whatever? Like, I'm going to try to take their music as serious as I can and try to see like the good and the bad of it. And it's like, I'll be willing to like point out criticisms, but it's like, if I don't have a good argument to back it up, why would I even, just open up the gate? Like, I could talk about how like boring and bland your style of music is and how much of a ripoff you seem, but it's like, I don't want to do that. You're just trying to do your thing, and this is like your passion. And it's like, if I think you are blatantly ripping off, I'll say something like that. But it's like, also it's like, I'm not perfect. I'm trying to leave a margin for error. So when I'm reviewing like big people though, like if I'm reviewing, Turnstile or Tyler the Creator or something, like, why not go off? Those are good records, but it's like, if I'm reviewing a big artist, like, why not talk shit because they're just a big artist who I'm probably never gonna have to talk to, and honestly probably need that level of criticism.
So what's the cutoff? When is someone big enough that you do that?
I think that, I don't know what the cutoff is really. I think it's more like, it depends on the grievance I have. So like, if a band seems like they're some reason, or like an artist is somehow exploiting something, or like, just doing some bullshit that should be called out, like, I don't think it matters. Like, if you're a small band that's clearly ripping off something, like, I'm gonna say something. Or if you're a big band, like, I feel like I can nitpick you more, So I think it's just a matter of like, are they making money off of it? Are they like pouring their heart and soul into it? If they're not, like, why do they even give a shit if I just think that they're trying to get laid with this album,
Fair enough.
It's, yeah. there's definitely like local artists that do that who just make music to like, you know, be more appealing on dating websites.
Does that work though?
No,
I guess.
no, it doesn't. Very petty. I don't think it would. I don't know.
It just sounds pretentious, but who knows? Who might, different strokes, different folks, I guess. Gotcha. I'm going to go soon, so I always like to end by having the artists I have on, like, say somebody in their local scene, like who's a band or artist in your local scene you want to give a shout out to.
Oh yeah, no, that's cool. I would love to do that. So there's a lot of good people to check out. I would say there's a lot of cool local ska bands. There's Bad Operation and Joystick that are very cool that I would check out. There's also a bunch of other little local artists here. Trying to think off the top of my head. I'm like freezing up a little bit. I'm sorry. Why am I freezing up? This is my chance to like help people find.
I think it's just what like happens because maybe I'm wrong on this, but it seems like because we are constantly doing things on our phone, it's so much easier just to click, 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 and not necessarily think of the name as we're doing it. And we're just like, oh, I'll just find it. So I don't know.
Yeah, that definitely happens to me. I don't know. I'm just gonna like say some names. I mean, like obviously big New Orleans artists are gonna be cool. But like there's some little guys that are doing some interesting stuff. I'm trying to think of people I wrote about this year. I don't know. Why am I just I'm sorry.
Well, since like you come from the journalism aspect, is there any like local journalists you want to give a shout out to or publication?
I mean, so there's definitely, Offbeat, check that out. Cool, whatever. Anti-Gravity's cool. There's also Gambit. Those are cool publications. Some cool people over there. Yeah. And I don't know. There's always more stuff going on. There's like, there we go. Okay, there's like bands in New Orleans and Baton Rouge that are doing this whole mope wave thing. Rich Octopus, Wonder Kid, 90s Baby, or Baby in the 90s is what they're called. Those are some bands you can check out. And a band I just reviewed was The Quickening. They're like a jam band that's cool. I just reviewed Metronome the City, which is like an ambient band. Lots of stuff. Well, there's like K the Beast. I think he's a cool guy. Alfred Banks. Pell is these are all rappers that are cool.
Yeah, I was listening to K the Beast earlier and like was really enjoying his newest album.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. I like his stuff. I think he's a cool dude.
Tell everyone where to find you, your projects, anything you got coming up you want people to know about, that sort of thing.
So I am on Instagram, I guess. You can look up just my name, which is Dalton Spangler. If you want to follow my work, I share pretty much everything on there, but I also have separate Instagram pages and social media pages for everything else. So if you want to follow that, you can, but you can find it all through that, which is just at Dalton Spangler. I'm also on Twitter. So I do a newsletter called Orbiting Punk that I'm kind of relaunching today. And I also plan on doing a podcast probably, and maybe some other stuff on maybe YouTube or something like that, or video. So that's my plans with that. I write for Offbeat mostly, and I occasionally write some other stuff, but you can find that all pretty much, I share it on my Instagram is where I do most of that, and Twitter.
Thanks so much for coming on, Dalton. I really appreciate it. It's been nice catching up again. Miss hanging out.
Yeah,
if you ever,
thanks for asking me.
Of course, Tallahassee, Thomasville, Valdosta area, just hit me up. Love to hang out again.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good one, man.
All righty, man. Thanks, Jaden.
Thanks.